So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regenerative. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. Are you ready to get your hands dirty? Recently, I discovered a documentary, To Which We Belong, and it blew me away. In fact, I'm going to throw to a little clip of it so you can get a first-hand experience of what that sounds like.
The whole modern farm paradigm has put farmers into an arms race.
Our soils are tired, they're naked, they're thirsty, and they're hungry.
We now know that if we optimize the life under the ground, we'll optimize life above ground.
Our degradation of the soil is more serious than all the wars ever fought.
If you thought that was magical, you're going to be blown away when you hear and watch the full documentary. I can't recommend this documentary more than enough. We ran a special screening with our Soil Pro members. And today, I'm really delighted to dig deeper with Pamela and Lindsay, who are part of the film crew and creators and executive directors. Welcome to our soil-loving community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I know that in our community, we left a lot of people really inspired from your documentary. Pamela, I want to ask you, what was your involvement in this documentary and why did you create it?
I was the person who came up with the idea and did most of the initial research, which took a number of years to give myself plenty of understanding of this field and why it mattered. And Lindsay and I have worked before together, and I talked to her a lot during this period, and she talked to me. And then eventually I said, I think I need to make this movie. I've made several others. Lindsay's been part of that along the way. It actually came about that I felt I needed to make it because of a dream that I had.
Right. So super personal and powerful.
Mm.
Was it something that like you woke up and just said, I need to do this? Or is it
I'd been thinking about it for a while, but films are very hard to make and they take a lot of time and money and all of that. So I was not sure I wanted to get back into a new film yet. But I had a dream where I couldn't breathe and I was outside and I was walking up a very rocky mountainside. And essentially the dream was I couldn't get my breath. Everything was dry, desiccated.
Wow.
And it was scary. And I woke up actually needing to take some deep breaths.
Wow.
And I had that dream and I had another one where it's more complicated, but I won't go into it. But the point is, it was visceral. And I felt like there has to be a new message about what we can do with this climate crises. Mm-hmm. And all that I'd been reading was giving me the hope. So I thought, I have to do it. So that's, yeah.
And Lindsay, what was your kind of thought when Pamela said, let's do this, I've had a dream? Did you have any experiences like that? Or what's your involvement in the movie?
I definitely Pam and I had sort of talked about these ideas, but I remember the first time that I sort of fell in love with the idea of thinking about, sort of started with ranching, I think. For the conversation Pam and I were having, and we were on horseback in Wyoming, and Pam was talking about how she was just so in love with the regenerative agriculture because it brought environmentalists and ranchers and farmers together in a way she had never seen before. And I think we're both very drawn to stories like that and the sort of win-win-win of it. And I, at the same time, was very enamored of Bren Smith's work at Green Wave, which I was really excited that we were able to bring into the film, because I think that takes these ideas out into the ocean and also sort of expands the footprint of where we can be doing this great work. And so, yeah, I remember that horseback ride, and then just personally getting really excited about Bren Smith's work. I live in Rhode Island now and on an island right by the ocean. So the ocean is very much in my mind at all and agricultural lands around here too. But so.
Love that. And I do think there was a great quote where they said, if we can regenerate the soils, why can't we take those principles and do it out in the oceans? And the amount of carbon and, you know, the business ventures that can occur. And especially in Australia, we're a big island, there's a lot of coastline that we have access to. You know, not having a coastline is almost weird for us. And I find it weird that in America, there are states that have no coastline, because here we all have it. So we are definitely underutilizing our waterways and our oceans for sequestering carbon and doing some really great initiatives, which was highlighted in the documentary. Pamela, how did you find all the talent for the documentary? Was that easy? Did you have a long list of people, or did you put a call out and have to sift through lots?
I didn't put a call out. I have a few talents in filmmaking. I can't, according to my sons, I can't turn on a camera, which is absolutely true. They're all filmmakers. I don't do a lot of the technical, but here's what I can do. I can conceive of a project, and I'm kind of intuitive about who to find for stories. And, you know, I read books. And so some of the things that I read were Judith Schwartz, The Cows Will Save Us.
Yep.
I think that's what it's called. Another one was The Soil Will Save Us by Krista, I forget her last name. It's a brilliant, wonderful book. I saw the TED Talk by Alan Savory back in 2013 about how we needed livestock to save civilization. And I love people who are working with ideas and overturning common, common thinking. And so I'm very attracted to that kind of film. So I'm a big reader, a big researcher, and gee, I don't know, just found people along the way. It was really easy.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that's easy for me. Yeah.
Well,
and Lindsay, I have to say, Lindsay told me about Ren Smith 5 years ago, and she said, or probably 6 or 7 at this point. And I'm like, oh, what's he doing? Something with the ocean. But she was so right. So she and I have worked together a long time. She brought Ren, and he's really important.
Yeah, you did an amazing job of storyboarding different types of growers, providers, ranchers. That really gave me the experience of, like, I almost felt transformed onto the farm, onto the paddock, and I was walking with everyone. And so I really, kudos to you for creating that kind of, in real life experience, especially when we're going through COVID. And like, for me, the movie was a little bit of an escapism. It's like, let me lose myself in this, 90-minute documentary of talking about soil and farming, but it was so much more than that. One of the stories that really hit home to me was the family that, let all their kids go off and then come back when they were ready. And so they could go out and experience the world and then really come back. And the way that family all worked together, and one enterprise's waste was another enterprise's input, it was just so holistic. Lindsay, can you talk to that experience of that farmer family and, the impact that had when you were putting it together? Because I'm assuming a lot of stuff had to get cut out. So what made that, story stay in?
So actually, we were very lucky. We didn't film with anyone that we ended up cutting. We did do pre-interviews with people, but we kept all of our stories. Obviously, you can't keep everything that you shoot with a family, but the James Ranch was one of those early families that Pam fell in love with. She initially met them at a Quivira conference, which is a ranching coalition based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Santa Fe, New Mexico, sorry. And the James family was just this wonderful, it was our first shoot that we did. And it was great because it was kind of where we wanted to get the viewer in some ways. Like, this is 30 years down the road, multi-generational, different enterprises working together. And so the challenge of capturing that as a filmmaker is, okay, how do you invite people into all of these pieces of it without that being just the whole film itself? So it was sort of a way of getting those textural elements that you were talking about and making it feel connected, but also we needed to build history into that piece of it. So, we worked with the family to collect archival photos from them so that we were able to build that story backwards, and you could feel, okay, this is where this family came from when things didn't look as great as they are now, and it was a bit of a struggle, and then coming to where you saw them in the film. And I think had the pandemic not happened, we would have probably returned to see their restaurant open, which was their kind of like pinnacle moment. And we were able to talk about it in the film, but because of not being able to travel, we didn't get to return to see it. And I think Pam and I are probably still hoping to get back there. Pam, especially to eat their delicious burger. And I love their cheeses.
So. Hamburgers I've ever tasted in my life.
There you go.
Grass-fed, yeah. Raised on high mountain grasses. Really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of like what everyone aspires. And I think what you did a great job of is that it's not an overnight success. Some people feel like they buy something and it's magical the next day. And there is a lot of hard work. There's a lot of effort. There's a lot of possibly, not seen eye to eye and having to prove, especially in the regenerative space. Someone who's farmed for many generations can be like, well, my grandfather did it this way and my father did it this way, and we're going to keep doing it this way. So being able to really show a family that has gone, pivoted a little bit and changed the way, but just so magical, bringing all the children back onto the farm at their own will. It wasn't any kind of like, forced succession planning, like you have to take over this farm. You could just tell that everyone wanted to be there and was so excited about their little mini enterprise that they were doing on the farm. And it just so great to see and very inspiring. And that's what I felt the movie did a great job of, is feeling you like there is hope. I could do this. What's next for me? Where there's a lot of documentaries that are a bit doom and gloom. And if we don't change, we're all hitting a brick wall. Pam, how did you help that narrative to not be doom and gloom and really stick on that positive?
I am so tired of films that give you all the bad news, and they do it with this notion that they're informing us, okay? It's a kind of false, I think it's false to do that, because here's the thing. We're in a sort of situation right now that we need to get out of quickly. But what is the point of just going on and on and on about how bad it is? I don't want to watch that. So when I began to see that there are solutions that can be applied around the world, and already, even though regenerative farming is only 5%, I think, of the world's farming at this point, it's just taking off. In the last few years, it's gone, even more so. So it is a way for us to actually address climate crises. So I had to make, I make hopeful films. What can I say? But the other thing is, we have a narrative that is doom and gloom, and it's just half the story. There are things that have been happening for 30 years that are miraculous and wonderful, but we don't see them. So I was intent on that. I was also intent on not having a tiny little farm that's pristine and beautiful, because a lot of people seem to think that you can do regenerative on a plot of land that's a few hectares or a few acres, but not on large scale. And I wanted to make this film to show, that's not true. It can happen on 5 acres or an acre in Kenya, or on 10,000 acres, and you get soy, corn, and wheat, which is the most common in large scale farms in this country. It works wherever you are, and it works whether you're a traditional, quote unquote, conventional farmer or one who's trying some experimental things.
I love that. It's such a big misconception. And I agree that, it's, a lot of people say, oh, that's cute. It's for the little hobbyist farmer. And then you're starting to see so many more case studies. And here in Australia, we have a company called Soils for Life, and they whole purpose is to document and create case studies from people who are repairing and healing the soils. And so I still meet people who like, show me, tell me the proof. And that's why I got really excited about the documentary, because I was like, go watch this. this will give you the proof. If you're not inspired after this movie, then it's you, not us. You know, it's because this just takes you through that paradigm shift. I remember in our classroom, one of the responses from our members was, this is just common sense. It's a no-brainer. Like, why are we not all farming this way? Like, it feels like it's a no-brainer. And so we've thrown the word around about regenerative. Lindsay, I want to know what your kind of definition, and it doesn't have to be the official one, but what does regenerative mean to you when you hear the word?
I mean, I think I'm going to borrow from Judith here, where, you know, it's repairing cycles. It's repairing nutrient cycles, carbon cycles, and water cycles that have been thrown out of whack by things we've done. So I feel like regeneration is that it's repairing those cycles. And the way you do that is working with nature rather than against it.
Yeah. Get out of the way. Pamela, do you want to add anything to that or echo it?
Yes. We have a mindset that we think if we break things down, that we can understand a problem and work that way. This regenerative practices are a little bit more complex because everything is interconnected. So if you start with the soil and feed the microbial life of the soil by drawing down more carbon through photosynthesis, by having more diverse plants on the ground, and that requires cattle moving across the grasslands very quickly, it requires certain things. We did not think of the soil in this country, and I think it's probably the same in Australia, as a living medium in the last 60, 70 years. So we've been under a different mindset. The mindset was add chemicals, stir, and grow food. Now so it's a new way of looking at things, but it does echo an older way. And we can even say we owe a lot to the indigenous populations around the world for farming and looking at their ways of doing things. But now the science backs that up. So that's what this film is really about. So it's regenerating the earth.
Yeah. And definitely my biggest thing is that we need to regenerate the soul and the spirit and the mind, and then everything on the field becomes a lot easier because the paradigm shift changes. And your documentary just really highlights that, of like putting a new lens on it and going, wow, I didn't know that this could be an outcome of the way that these farmers are farming. Lindsay, when you were watching the content, was there something that you just saw and you're like, this needs to stay in the film? Like, it is such a big aha moment. Do you have any of those those feelings?
I mean, a million. The film is full of them. I mean, I'm going to pass that one to Pam because I don't have an immediate one on the top of my. Is there one for you, Pam?
Lindsay and I and our editor, who is Nancy C. Kennedy, and she's quite brilliant at storytelling, big stories, big ideas.
Oh, thought of one.
Yeah, go ahead. What's yours?
Oh, I just thought of one that I really fought to keep in the film, which is a very quiet moment, but Malloy at the end of the film is working with her dad to move sheep. She's learned how to move cattle with her dad, and her like pet farm project is, or ranch project is, having her own sheep, and he's teaching her how to move the sheep. And there's this quiet moment where she's like, so what do I do now, Dad? He asked, what do you do now? And she's like, do we push him through? And he's like, no, we wait. And just the quietude in that moment and that kind of transfer of knowledge between generations. And I think that for me is quite a metaphor a little bit for what regenerative ag is, which is this waiting, not in a passive way, but allowing nature to help you do the repair that's needed to our soils. And so that moment, while it's quiet and like our wonderful composer helped us, have the viewer sort of be there with Malloy, and Nancy's editing and getting the close-up, like there's ways we brought the viewer into feeling that moment. But that definitely for me, I remember that happening and just like, it took my breath away. I was like, this is this is what we need to try to get people to understand about how this is a different way of practicing agriculture than the, you know, cowboys whipping their animals and, you know, huge tractors raking, you know, it's a different thing. And yeah.
We, Lindsay and I talk a lot about what we're doing, of course. And both of us were trying to get a movie that was less about man against nature and let's fight the big fight and all of these things, which is hard because that's what all of our dramas are about. Correct. You know, we're all, who's going to win? Who's going to lose? So this film is trying to give you a different view of life, which is less push, more wait, with an understanding that nature has the ability to regenerate. It's not all on us. It's actually if you can embrace it, it's an easier way to farm and to ranch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Move out of the way.
I think there's one other moment that I really felt like was important to understand. It's like the question of like, why do people change their mind to do this? And Alejandro and mentorship, like the importance of mentorship. And so Alejandro and Jesus Almeida standing at the fence, kind of like talking about how Jesus is like the person that made it possible for Alejandro to do this. And he is the person he can always call on the phone. And then sort of talking about like, why do you make this change? And it's because you're like broken. And there's from that need to repair, really beautiful things can happen. And so like, I remember when I was actually at dinner with Jesus Almeida when he told that story, the first, like the being broken piece, and he brought, like, I teared up. It's like, it's very emotional for me, that sense of like, where do we as humans decide to make change from? And that is kind of like a universal, but it obviously relates to the regenerative ag movement.
100%. Yeah, I had that same moment, and I wrote down notes when we were watching it, and the word broken is here on my notes and circled because it just hit me. It's like, we don't need to wait until we are broken to make change. You know, we can be preventative. And the documentary started with a word where it was like, I'm tired. You know, the father was tired running it that way. And, there was this sense of like everyone doing it non-regeneratively was exhausted and tired, and the dirt was tired, dusty, and hungry. Like, these were some of the key words that really stood out to me. And I went, that is the depiction that we need to show through voice and through imagery, because what happens in Old MacDonald's Farm in the kids' book, where everything's green and lush and nice working tractors, isn't the reality, you know. And to your point before as well, Pamela, is like, we are in a system where we're graded against each other. You either pass or you fail, you do good, and there's a scale. And in regenerative, I find that that's less. It's like, if we're moving in the right step, whether it be spiritually, you know, mentally, on the farm, off the farm, that is all positive signs, you know. So working together and being connected is just such a, it's why we wake up every morning, because this year we changed our avatar in the business to say we don't wake up for the farmer or the food provider or the grower. We wake up for the soil. It's a living organism, and there's no reason why it can't be our avatar, and why we wake up every day to make soil better today than what it was yesterday.
Yeah, and just a shout out to, films get made with teams. And I think part of what lets the viewer for this film into connecting with the soil and connecting with nature is our amazing crew. Mike Jones did our sound, and we did a lot of field recording. So it just made me think of it like tired soils, and like hearing dry earth has its own feel. And then Jerry Resius and our two amazing drone operators visually allowed you into these landscapes and into these people's homes, and into, Jerry Resius grew up on a farm in Iowa, is one of the reasons we wanted to work with him as our cinematographer, and also shot all of Anthony Bourdain's shows. So has lots of experience shooting all over the world, beautiful things, but he, is completely at peace in a herd of 1,000 animals. And like, there's not a lot of, like, you as a viewer get to have that texture and that intimacy with families, with the livestock, with the land, with the dung beetle. And that's all because of, the amazing crew that we got to work with on this project. So
truly amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the principles of regenerative is biodiversity. It's just as much as biodiversity of people, the team, the talent, the mindset, the thinking, the ideas, the brainstorming. That all matters, and so many farms operate in silo. They just do their thing. They think everyone's on the same page, and there's not enough talking and collaborating. And that's why we run in this podcast, to give our soil lovers a voice for our soil. And so we're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, I want to know where the name of the documentary came from. So if you're joining us at the moment, we're talking about the documentary To Which We Belong. We'll be right back after this break. All right, soil lovers, you're hanging out with Regen Ray, Pamela and Lindsay. We're talking about the amazing documentary To Which We Belong. I'm super curious, where did the name come from? And I know the answer. This is a little bit of a loaded question. So I'd love to hear what the story behind it. Pamela, over to you first.
All right. Well, I had named this film Land, Water, Sky. I thought that was very concrete, very visual, on and on. Lindsay said, "Eh." So late in the day, actually, she came across the quote. It's by Aldo Leopold, who is an early 20th century agronomist, I guess you'd call him, and an environmentalist. He's still read, he's brilliant. But she came across that, and it encapsulated the relationship that we were really trying to show in this film much more deeply. And I cannot for the life of me remember the whole quote. Lindsay, do you remember?
I just looked it up because I can never remember. So
I can't either. I don't know why.
We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. Yeah. And so for me, I liked Land, Water, and Sky. I think it's a beautiful title, but I think what this film is about people reconnecting to the land, and that there is a role for us in doing that. And so we need to both remember our connection to the land, but also be part of the ecosystem rather than this totalitarian force imposing our will upon it. And so that's the feeling I was trying to find in a new title, where we were in it, but it was about a relationship rather than and that same phrase actually comes up in another quote that I love as well. So it was also one of those things, when I saw it twice, I was like, that might be the winner.
Fine. Lovely. And I do admit that throughout the documentary, I believe it's at the end. And so it's like a little aha moment. It's comes up at the end and you're like, that's where it comes from. As a marketer, I was a little bit honestly confused about it, but then it kind of penny dropped and I went, awesome. This is, why we need to make content like this. Is, I want the soil lovers listening to pique their interest and go, this is a documentary that is on the top of my bucket list, and we felt so connected with it that as a community, we made it homework for our members to watch it and then come back and talk about our key learnings. And there were a lot of tears in that room because it just hit hard to what people want to see the world as a better place and as a more wholesome, connected understanding. And one of the things that I took from David Attenborough's witness statement on Netflix was the fact that when humans left Chernobyl, even though it was so toxic for humans to go there, nature came back. Wildlife was there, trees were growing through the building. And that just proves to the point that if we get out of the way and work with nature and stop controlling it, it will heal, and it will repair. And your storytelling of all these farmers who had all different types of land, which is what really, sometimes we share case studies and that's okay for them, they're in tropical. Oh, that's okay for them, they got the land handed to them. Oh, that's okay for them, they got a funding to buy the land. And your documentary just said it doesn't matter whether you're a First Nation, Indigenous, whether you're, family-run business, or whether you're a solopreneur, or you're going to go and farm the waterways and the oceans. There is a story that can hit your heart from a regenerative point of view.
Yeah, that was actually a very important piece of the documentary. I wanted to show that you could do regenerative ranching in the Chihuahuan Desert, which is dry. doesn't get any rain past 2 months a year. You have to grow grasses for the rest of the year. And he was Alejandro Carrillo, who we'd met at a conference early on, is an amazing guy, kind of magical. He's beautifully spoken, but he's increased his herd size 3 times in 9 years. He's growing, he's running 3 times more cattle. So that's a desert. And then you have high mountain, like Paradise Valley in Montana. That's pretty dry also, very high. And then you have Kenya. You have the small plot farmers at the head of the waterway. That's wet, wet, wet. So, I wanted to make sure people weren't going to give me that argument, or they weren't going to be able to make that argument, Yeah. And I think, and then, Nebraska is one of my favorite stories. The 2 brothers who had the cover seed business, green cover seeds. They're just regular farmers, this 3rd, 4th generation. Mm-hmm. And they grow corn, soybeans, and wheat. And yet they are 100% behind regenerative practices. And they actually have a seed business of cover crops. And they're doing really well with that. And they're spreading the word. So you got all types.
Yep. And I love that, the fact that the farming enterprise that maybe was doing cattle is now doing a seed business. And what I loved about that story was the fact that they were doing bespoke seed mixes. They were really understanding the soil profile, your climate, your goals for the business, like what are you trying to achieve, and say, this is the seed mix. It's not off the shelf, one size fits all. Again, it's that attention to detail, that being still, observing, sitting with nature. What is the business goals? What's the land outcomes, and let's build a bespoke seed mix that's going to work for your enterprise. And that's, what I see over and over in this regenerative space. And that's why I keep getting more excited to dig deeper into our soils and give it a voice. Lindsay, did you want to say something about what we were just chatting about?
It just occurred to me that we had wanted to include obviously we have Nicole Masters from New Zealand, but I know most of your audience is in Australia, and I know Pam just wanted to have her, talk about Charles Massey, and also Pam, I'm forgetting that wonderful gentleman's name who has passed away, but had that, he really spoke about like the emotional connection to it. And we watched this YouTube video he did, and it's going to take me a second to, Pam, what?
He did a video, 5 billion hectares of hope.
Okay.
A wonderful video. And he died unexpectedly about 2 years ago. He was part of the Savory Institute family. And Tony Lovell, was it?
Tony Lovell, yeah. Tony Lovell. So just there's part of, yeah, that's his name. He, my brother lives in Australia. There's part of me that wishes, but for the pandemic, we could have come and
wanted to go.
Because I know you guys you have a huge need to do repair to your soils. You're getting desertified rather rapidly, but also there's some very inventive thinkers in your country, obviously. And we liked what Tony Lovell was doing, sort of slow money and figuring out how to support ranchers that were transitioning to regenerative ag and had a slightly longer timeline for capital. And I don't know, there's a lot of amazing innovation in Australia. We can't put everything in the film, but there's part of me that wishes we could have.
Well, and I personally love Charles Massey. I've only, I got his tome. I will say I haven't read every single bit of it, even though I'm a pretty big reader, but it's, again, what we were trying to do in this film is show how you can actually do this no matter what, very science-based, but let's not forget that this is really about the interconnection of humans to the land and to each other also. And respect, it's about respect. And fun, people have fun doing this.
But that's the thing that I see so often is when people go down this regenerative space, they're like, I'm getting time back and I'm getting clarity and I'm getting, they're around less inputs that are causing other health issues. And, it's just so, pure and it's just full of light and clean energy. And I just, I sit here going, what are we doing? Why are we waiting for the science to catch up when it feels like the right thing to do. It makes common sense, or it's like, of course, we'd want our land to look green, lush, and you know, full of life, as opposed to a desert dust bowl. And Lindsay, I'm glad you can see that our land is degraded, because a lot of the farmers here in Australia are turning a blind eye to it. And you know, I think, unfortunately, sometimes we live in a system where we need droughts to exist, so that way there is a drought relief fund, you know, and there's no drought prevention fund. And, you know, sometimes, you know, those things are stuck between red tape and bureaucracy and feeding the system, so that way, you know, flood, you know, relief funds are existing. And I always question whether sometimes these grants are motivated in keeping the problem going so they can renew their funding. And that's a topic on its own. So I'm glad you can see that our land is degrading, and we very much feel the same as well. I want to know if there was anything Lindsay already touched on this, that you would have maybe liked to add a bit more of an Australian voice on to the documentary. Pamela, is there anything that you would have liked to add, edit, delete, or modify? Not saying that it's not perfect already, but, you know, in hindsight, or feedback from the audience, has there been anything?
No, actually, no. I'm really happy with this. You know, it would be interesting. The only thing I could say, and I'm going to shoot myself for even saying it, but it's a very dense film. It's about, you know, many different themes. If you're not a rancher or a farmer, it can be dense. So to do shorts, you know, to do a series on people who are doing this kind of ranching, so that people can see a little bit at a time, could be really interesting. And at the same time, I'm a real science geek, I think, and I'd like to have had a few more charts in there to show how successful this is. And I would have had the number of cattle now running are X instead of Y. And I would have had a lot more of the numbers. I like numbers. But, you know, there's only so much you can do in a film.
Love it. Lindsay, did you had an idea?
Yeah, I another piece that I would have loved to get in the film, but again, we were speaking to a brilliant woman and her father in, I think it was North Dakota. I can't remember if it was North or South Dakota, but she's part of the Lakota tribe and was doing great work with the bison. And I think for me, it was wonderful to get the Maasai and sort of that indigenous knowledge into this. But I think a lot of regenerative agriculture is really just a return to a knowledge that is stored in maybe alternative archives. But I think for me, that's a piece that if we had had more flexibility to travel and more time to unpack, and maybe it's another film, but that connection to indigenous knowledge being the root of all of this in some ways is something that I would like to honor, and wish we could have, it's in the film, but it's not, I would have loved to have more of it in the film, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah, lovely. And I was going to bring that up. Oh, sorry, Pam. Yep.
No, we felt the same. We both wanted that very much. We wanted the bison. We wanted the indigenous populations who were working with bison. It was a big thing that we wanted to have in the film. The unfortunate thing was it was difficult. We had COVID, we couldn't travel. And it was, you know, it was a little bit difficult because of culture clash, I think. Mm-hmm. Just slightly, there was more people we would have to go through to work with that population. And we wanted to do that, but when we began to go down the path, then COVID came. We couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And just a shout out, I know you do screening of other films. I don't know if you've screened Gather as part of your, but that's a nice film that speaks to that a bit.
I've actually had it been mentioned before. It's yeah. Is that following a female character that's kind of going from community?
There's sort of three different stories, but there's like a lead female. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
it could be an interesting thing to share with your audience.
Yeah. So I just want to know what's next. Is there another part of this? Is it getting it on Netflix? Is that part of the goal, or are you wanting to distribute it more in the community? So 2 questions there.
Well, two things. One is right now we're doing festivals, which is always the first step. Festivals, unfortunately, are difficult because they're on, they're off, nobody goes, whatever. It's just COVID. That's difficult. And by the way, this film is really part of the reason we have COVID is because we've entered too many wilderness areas with our farming and our technology. So, excuse me, let's bring that to the fore also.
I agree.
But that's going on. We have a distributor and a sales agent. We're trying to get it onto various platforms, VOD. I'd love to be on Netflix. Netflix and Amazon are where people go, to watch things. The interesting thing is, in the last year, their policies have changed so that they're not that interested in individual independent films. So we're having a little bit of a blip there. We're not sure what we'll do, but it's getting out. People are hearing about it. I think it will have a very good run. Excuse me.
Totally. Is it a part two? Any thoughts on, you kind of alluded that maybe there's another part. Is that just an idea, or would you have the energy to do another one?
I think we are it's a lot more exhausting than people know to actually get a film out into the world. So I know Pam is percolating on a film about trees. We do love trees. I think there's a film maybe I would like to think about, if it may not be another film, it may be a physical place to gather people around these ideas. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I love the idea of having shorts and mini movies and I think, sometimes even with the amount of attention span that people have or time that they have, a 15-minute bite size could be the punch that they need to get thinking a bit differently. That opens the door to, going down that path, that rabbit hole deeper.
Yeah, and I'm really excited right now and thinking about how do you get young people engaged with these. And I've just been going on a thought journey about, what would a camp look like that involves not only climate activism and teaching kids about what they can be doing in their schools, but also exposing them to these types of agricultures or these types of practices young, and maybe kids not from farming communities, but urban kids, seeing, okay, what does ocean farming look like? What does regenerative agriculture look like on the farm or a ranch? Or, also solar panel installation, keeping young people in conversation with these things that are going to save our planet in a kind of hands-on way is something that appeals to me. But I'm obviously a filmmaker at heart, so I don't know if it'll be a film or something. I can't, but
I think both Lindsay and I are quiet activists. And one thing that concerns me is so much of our work is divorced from our life. We do a lot of things on the computers and it's all electronic all the time. So getting people outside, not just for recreation, but for work, is for me something that I'd like to see happen more, but I'm not sure if that's a film or what.
Yeah. I think COVID's definitely shaken that whole 9 to 5 sitting in an office in a major city regime. And maybe that is the start of something. And like you said before, COVID may be the, wake up call that we needed, and we need to not point the finger and say it's all of us that have kind of contributed to where we are today. I want to ask our signature question. Are you ready to become the voice of our soils?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll go with Lindsay first. Pamela, you're going to have some time to think. If you were the voice of our soils, I want you to embody yourself as the soil, and the soil now has a mouth. What would you say to us on Earth?
I think I would say, connect with me in the way that you're able to in your life. And so I'm thinking of my soils that are right outside my window here. And for me, I'm rewilding my yard and basically moving away from a lawn and planting perennials. And I'm trying to connect with my soil and understand that diversity in the soil means diversity in what I see above ground. And, you know, since this project that looks pretty crazy above ground, you know, I had hundreds of dragonflies come through as part of their migration. And I've had snakes and turtles and deer and bunnies, and just the abundance of wildlife that has come into my yard in my small way of connecting to my soils and caring for them. And, you know, doing my version of a cover crop, which is I needed to fix some nitrogen in an area that had grasses. So I planted a diversity of grasses, but I brought in microclover. And so I think just listening to me if I'm the soil, and, you know, getting your hands, like finding a connection, a physical connection.
Love that. Pamela?
Feed me. Just please feed me. Give me all kinds of different root systems delivering carbon in different ways. Feed me, plant, let the dandelions grow. Let the clover grow. Let the tall grasses grow. Just the more diverse your plants on the ground, the more diverse your, what Alejandro calls the microherd underground. And the more diverse that is, the richer the soil, the healthier plants that are grown, and the healthier that they will feed. It's a loop. Feed me. I'm starving.
Feed me, but not chemicals.
No, yeah. Feed me with plant.
With diversity. Yeah.
Of plant matter and growing plants. The more roots you have in the ground from different plants, the more. And also, what I think is a miracle, oh, I'm so dry. I'm not able to hold the water. Please put more. If the more different plants you have on, the more carbon gets into the soil, and then the more your soil is able to hold the water. And that's going to repair the water cycle that is broken.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Lovely. And that's why when we watched it, everyone was like, this is a no-brainer. Why would we not do this? So, you know, I really love that, you know, listen to me, connect with me, and feed me. And I love that. So soil lovers, the documentary we're talking about is called To Which We Belong. Pamela, how can people hang around with you more and watch a trailer and watch this wonderful movie?
Well, we have a website that is also pretty informative. We put a lot of articles from all over the world on that. And that is towhich-we-belong.com. And our trailer is also on that website. So it's towhich-we-belong.com. If you want to have a screening with your community, you can buy a license, and it's fairly simple. You just buy a license from our distributor, which is, you know, you'd contact us on the website. And we hope that's how people are going to see the film, in community with each other, farm communities, ranching communities, virtual communities right now around the world, so that they can get inspired, ask questions, learn from the film, and be able to discuss it. So those are two ways right now.
Awesome.
Also on our website, you can, we have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter that you can connect with. And then also for people who are looking for even more stuff, there's in the About section at the bottom, there's a drop down for 4 short videos that were sort of, you were asking, what are some of the things that didn't make it into the film? There's just 4 shorts that are just like a little bit more on some of these important topics. And also on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter, which we tell people once a month. You know, we have different themes each month. And for anyone that's interested in this topic, that's a great resource to stay connected with what the film's doing. But more than anything, we're trying to add value, like your podcast will be featured on it once this podcast is released. So things like that. It's kind of aggregating knowledge in the regenerative ag and what we're reading, what podcasts we're into, what we're watching. So
what's happening with the UN POP 26, what kind of, you know, COP, I'm sorry, not POP, I'm tired. COP 6 in Scotland, you know, things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it sounds like you definitely got your finger on the pulse, and kudos to you. I know I've been through that buying a license process, and I really encourage soil lovers out there. One, watch the documentary. Secondly, think about how you can make an impact in your community and host a screening. I know it's hard with COVID, but we can all be clever and we can all do virtual stuff. We can, we're starting to come out of lockdown and so forth. So hopefully by the time you're listening to this, we're already out of it, all that, and we're back into the physical world and running events. I really encourage you to be the impact and be the change that you want to see. Pamela and Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on to the show today and hanging out with our soil lovers and talking about the magical movie and documentary that you've put together, To Which We Belong.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Ray. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, all you soil
lovers
out there. It's a good community that you're in.
Yeah, I love it.
And
I
just have to say it was such a joy. Pam and I we live in different states, but we both watched the Soil Lovers classroom that you did. And, it's a time when we don't get to be in community with our audience as much as we'd like. And so hearing their responses and what they connected to was really meaningful to me and to Pam and to Paula, our other producer. So thank you, Soil Lovers, for connecting with our film and for what you are doing out there in the world.
Excellent. Well, there you go. Soil lovers, if you want to watch that replay of our virtual classroom, it's on the soillearningcenter.com. And throughout this podcast, we mentioned links and books. They will all be around the audio experience. Or if you're watching on the Soil Lovers Learning Center, then you will see us and see all the nods of heads that we're going. But I want to finish off with a little quote that I got from the documentary, which was, "Cows will save the world, but it's because of the grass." And I think that really just turns the paradigm to not blame the cow. So there you go, soil lovers. Get onto the documentary. It's a hoot and a half, and you will love it. You'll be inspired. And that was as soon as I watched this, we had to buy a license. We had to get everyone on the show. And I sent that email out so quickly to say, hey, we just did this and it was so magical. And if you want to relive that, it's on the soillearningcenter.com. I'm Regen Ray. Get outside, get your hands dirty, start listening to the soil, start connecting with it, and feed it. Until next time, stay curious. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.